Let's talk for just a minute about how we add and subtract integers from each other. This is probably most easily explained using a number line. So let's begin there. We'll talk about adding two numbers and subtracting two numbers on a number line, and then I'll give you some other techniques as to how we add and subtract numbers as well. So if you're doing A plus B, what you're doing is you're starting at A and then you're adding an additional B units on top of A. So we would increase A, assuming that B is positive, we would increase A a certain amount of units, and we would get to A plus B because we would add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many B units is. So this distance here is a total of B units away. Now if B was a negative number, we would actually go to the left of A, not to the right of A. But basically you can think of addition as moving farther down the number line, starting at A, and then adding on an additional B units, assuming that B is positive. Now if you're doing subtraction, then it's just the reverse. Here if we have A, and let's assume B is a positive number, if you subtract B, you'll be moving back a total of B units, and we'll be at A minus B. Now if B is a negative quantity itself and you're subtracting a negative, then it gets a little weird, and we're going to talk about subtracting negatives actually in the next video. But basically you would do the opposite of this and it would actually move to the right, believe it or not. So basically just think of starting at A and then either moving to the right or to the left, depending on whether you're adding or subtracting a number, and also keeping in mind whether that number is positive or negative. All right, so now there are some other techniques. If you're actually working through a math problem, every time you do addition, you probably are not going to want to write a number line, do tick marks, do dots to the left of A, dots to the right of A. That's just too time consuming. So we need some more pragmatic ways of adding and subtracting integers more quickly. Now, different instructors teach this different ways. One way that I like, and I'm going to show you a couple ways, but one way that I really like is very informal, but it does the trick, is to think about money, because money is something that we deal with every day. And when you think about adding a positive number, you can think about earning money, maybe from a job or selling something, but you can think about negative numbers as owing or spending money, and that makes it very easy to think about. Let's work through a couple examples. Let's say we had 7 plus 10. Well, very naturally, if you earn $7 from one job and you earn $10 from another job, then you would have a total of $17 in your pocket. But if you had something like maybe -5 plus 12, in money terms, this would be equivalent to owing somebody $5. Maybe you borrowed lunch money or something from them, but then you made $12 from a job or something like that. So you take the money that you earn and you pay back the person that you owe the $5, and then how much do you have in your pocket? Well, because it's in terms of money, we understand that this would be $7 in our pocket still. It works if you have two negatives. If you have, let's say, -3 plus -15 or something like that, then that would be equivalent to owing one person $3, owing another person $15. We don't really have any income, but you do have a net total of your debt. In total, you owe $18 to people. And so this would be -$18, negative indicating that we still owe it. So that's a little bit informal, but for most cases that does the trick, because it's equating adding and subtracting numbers, including positives and negatives, with something that we're very comfortable with and that we deal with on an everyday basis. Now there is a more formal way of adding and subtracting numbers. This is what you'll find in a lot of textbooks, and it's good. It's just, it can be kind of a lot to remember, and so let me talk about this one for a minute. The formal rules go like this. If you have a positive plus a positive, there's, you just add the numbers. There's not really much I can say about adding a positive plus a positive. You add them and your answer will be positive. If you have a negative plus a negative, then what you can do is you can take the absolute value of each number, in other words, get the distance it is away from 0, these will be positive or non-negative numbers. You would add those together, and then you would make the sign a negative. And again, this equates to, think back to the money example. If you owe one person $5 and one person $10, then you owe somebody $15 in total. Well, what you're doing is you're taking the 5 in debt and the 10 in debt. Think of those as the absolute values, the positive versions of those numbers, adding them together, and then considering that quantity, the total quantity, debt, right? So you attach the negative back onto it. Now, where it gets a little hairier though is when you start doing positives plus negatives and negatives plus positives. Here's the formal rules, and we'll work through some examples. What we do is we take the absolute value of both numbers, the positive number and the negative number. So you should end up with two positive numbers, or at least none of the numbers should be negative at least. Then we take their difference, we subtract those two, but we keep the sign for that end answer the same as the larger absolute value number. So if the larger absolute value number was equated with the negative number, the final answer would be negative. If the larger of the absolute value numbers was positive, we would keep the answer positive. Let me just do one quick example, and then we'll run through actually a whole bunch of examples. But for this one right here, let's say you had negative 11 plus 17, for example. So this is a negative plus a positive. Well, the absolute value of negative 11 is 11, and the absolute value of 17 is 17. So we're going to take the difference of 11 and 17. 17 minus 11 is 6. Now the question is, should this be a positive 6 or a negative 6? So for that, I'll look at these two absolute value numbers and I see which one was larger. Well, 17 was larger than 11, so I'm going to keep the sign of the 17 number. So this will be a positive 6. If this number was larger, then I would have kept the negative because it was equated with the negative number I took the absolute value of, not the positive. So negative 11 plus 17 is positive 6. And this way works very well. But as you can see, there are a number of steps. So this way takes quite a bit of practice, where thinking about the money example is a little bit more intuitive. All right, let's wrap up with subtraction, and then we'll do a couple of examples. We haven't really talked about subtraction. We've been mostly focusing on addition. So how do we do subtraction? Well, it's quite simple. Whenever you have A minus B, you can think of this as A plus negative B. This is the same thing as subtraction. And we've already accounted or talked about adding positives and negatives plus positives and negatives. So basically we just turn this back into an addition problem, and then we can proceed like we've been talking about. Okay, so let's run through these examples real quick. I think I'll do these using the formal rules, but then when we're done, I'll just briefly talk about them in the money realm as well. So 11 plus 31, there's really nothing to it but to do it. So we have 31, we have 11. We add these, you would get 42. They're both positive, so your answer is 42. All right, next up we have negative 15 plus 21. That's a positive plus a negative. So we're going to take the absolute value of negative 15. That's 15. We'll take the absolute value of 21. That's 21. The difference between 21 and 15, that's 6. Now I'm going to keep this a positive 6 as opposed to a negative 6 because 21 was larger than 15. And sure enough, negative 15 plus 21 is 6. All right, how about negative 25 minus, so here's subtraction, minus 14. Well, the first thing we would do is we would think of this as negative 25 plus negative 14. Okay, so this is two negatives, so I would take the absolute value of negative 25, that's 25. I would take the absolute value of negative 14, that would be 14. I would add those two quantities together, that would give us 39. So this is 39. and I would make the answer negative because both of these quantities were negative to begin with. Okay, so that's the formal rules. What about the informal rules? Let's think about the money example. If I made $11 at one job, $31 at another job, and then I went home, in my pocket I would have $42. That's pretty clear. If I owed someone $15, but I made $21 from a job, I would have enough to pay the person back because I made more than I spent or owed somebody, and in my pocket I would have a total of $6 left over. That makes sense. If I owed one person $25 and I owed another person $14, then I would be even deeper in debt. In total I would owe $39, and so that's why this answer would be negative, and I still added 25 and 14 together, but I made it negative because I owed someone something. So anyways, hopefully, I know this is a little long, but hopefully that helps you understand adding positives and negatives as well as subtraction just a little bit better.